The first thing Jacob noticed was the weight of someone else's breath moving the fabric of his old cotton shirt, and the second was the quiet terror that crept up his spine when he realized that breath did not belong to his daughter. Morning light spilled across the small living room of his rented townhouse in Ohio, catching dust in the air and the outlines of a woman standing near the kitchen counter, barefoot, wrapped in his shirt like it had always belonged to her. His heart thudded hard, not with desire but with disbelief, the kind that makes you wonder if exhaustion has finally cracked something inside you. What if you woke up one day and the rules of your life were suddenly rewritten, right there between yesterday's grief and today's responsibilities? What would you do if the person standing in your kitchen did not fit the life you were barely holding together? Jacob was a single father who measured time in school drop-offs, overdue bills, and the quiet moments after his daughter Noah fell asleep clutching her stuffed bear. Since his wife had died 3 years earlier in a hit-and-run accident, mornings had become exercises in survival rather than comfort. He worked nights at a packaging warehouse and mornings as a delivery driver, squeezing sleep into the spaces most people used to dream. The house smelled faintly of laundry detergent and burnt coffee, and the counters still held yesterday's crayons and mismatched toy cars. This was not a place meant for surprises, and certainly not for a woman like the one now standing there, calm and composed, eyes carrying the weight of boardrooms and decisions worth millions. Her name was Rebecca, though Jacob did not know it yet in the way that mattered. To him, she was the woman he had found slumped against the steering wheel of a luxury car on the side of a rain-soaked highway the night before, blood on her forehead and panic in her eyes. He had been late for work again, and had almost driven past her, almost. But something in him, something shaped by loss, and the memory of a promise to always stop when someone needed help, had made him pull over. He called an ambulance, waited with her in the rain, and when the paramedics told him she would be fine but shaken, she had looked at him with gratitude that felt too heavy for a stranger. She had no one to call, she said, and he had offered his couch without thinking of consequences, only of doing what felt right. Now, in the quiet morning, the consequences stood there holding a chipped mug, his shirt hanging loose over tailored confidence that could not be hidden even without a suit. Rebecca was the CEO of a national logistics company, a fact that would later ripple through Jacob's life like a stone thrown into still water. But in that moment she was simply a woman who had slept poorly, who had borrowed clothes because her own were ruined, and who looked at Jacob with an expression that made his chest tighten. Jacob felt frozen, not because of scandal but because of what her presence represented. His life had been small and carefully controlled since tragedy struck, every decision filtered through the needs of his daughter, and the fear of losing what little stability he had built. Rebecca's calm gaze unsettled him because it seemed to see all of that, the fatigue in his posture, the quiet courage it took to keep going. If you were standing where he stood, would you be afraid of hope sneaking back in where you had boarded it up? Would you push it away before it could hurt you again? The morning unfolded without drama, just shared silence and the hum of the refrigerator. Jacob made toast while Rebecca watched the sunlight catch on family photos taped crookedly to the fridge. There was no flirting, no easy laughter, only an unspoken understanding that something important was happening, though neither of them knew what shape it would take. When Rebecca finally spoke, her words were not about the night before or the awkwardness of the present. They were about him. About how she had watched him kneel in the rain to calm a stranger, how she had noticed the way he spoke about his daughter even while bleeding himself. She told him that kindness like that was rare, and that it had reminded her of the man she used to be before success hardened her edges. Those words left Jacob frozen more than any surprise could have. No one had seen him like that in years, not as a struggling father or a tired worker, but as someone who still mattered. He felt something inside him crack open, a mixture of grief for what he had lost and longing for what he had buried. He did not trust it, did not trust her, but he could not deny the warmth that spread through his chest. Rebecca left later that morning, slipping back into a world of assistants and stock prices, leaving behind the faint scent of expensive perfume and a silence that felt heavier than before. Jacob returned to his routine, to lunches packed and backpacks zipped, telling himself it had been a strange detour in a life that could not afford detours. Yet days later, a letter arrived. Then another. Rebecca did not offer money or solutions, only conversation. She asked about Noah, about Jacob's dreams before life narrowed them. She spoke of her own loneliness at the top, of the way success had cost her relationships she never learned how to replace. Their connection grew slowly, painfully honest, marked by long gaps and cautious trust. Rebecca visited again, this time in jeans, sitting on the floor to color with Noah, listening more than she spoke. Jacob watched from the doorway, fear and hope wrestling in his chest. He knew what it was to lose everything, and he knew the risk of letting someone in. But he also knew the quiet damage of shutting the door forever. Hardship did not vanish. Bills still came, grief still surfaced on quiet nights, and Rebecca still carried the weight of a world that demanded perfection. But something shifted. They learned to stand beside each other, rather than in front or behind. Jacob found confidence returning in small ways, applying for a supervisor role he had never thought himself worthy of. Rebecca began turning down meetings, choosing presence over power. Neither saved the other. They simply reminded each other what it meant to be human. Years later, Jacob would think back to that morning, to the shock of seeing a woman in his shirt and the words that had frozen him in place. He would realize that it was not the surprise that changed his life, but the recognition. The moment someone saw him fully and chose to stay anyway. Before the story ends, I want to ask you something from the heart. If you have ever faced a moment that changed everything without warning, share your thoughts in the comments, because someone else might need to know they are not alone. And if this story stirred something inside you, if it made you think about kindness, second chances, or the quiet power of being seen, please like, comment, share, and subscribe, so more hearts can find stories that remind them hope can still walk into the room when you least expect it.